I still remember the way the champagne glass shook in my hand that night. The restaurant lights glistened off its rim, but my fingers trembled so badly that drops sloshed onto the tablecloth. It should have been a celebration our sixth wedding anniversary, the milestone where love deepens into permanence, where years of trials blend with laughter into something solid. But instead, my husband stood across from me, raising his glass and declaring to a room full of strangers that he was free, single, and searching. His voice carried like a hammer blow, smashing through the fragile shell of hope I had still been clinging to. That moment was supposed to honor the life we had built together, the quiet mornings over coffee, the promises whispered when no one else was listening. Instead, it became my public execution. Jake's words were polished, delivered with theatrical confidence, as if he had practiced them in front of a mirror. My body went cold. My pulse roared in my ears, drowning out the murmurs spreading through the tables around us. I wanted to believe I had misheard, but then he reached under the table with a flourish, pulling out a gift box like a magician revealing the final act of a cruel trick. "Open it," he urged, voice sweet but sharp, a knife wrapped in velvet. His mother's eyes gleamed with cruel delight, and his father smirked, as though the whole scene had been scripted for their entertainment. My fingers felt stiff as I lifted the lid. Inside was a folded black t-shirt, its bold white letters screaming at me even before I unfolded it. 6 years of disappointment. The air left my lungs. It wasn't just a joke, not a tasteless prank between friends. It was the culmination of months, no years of distance, coldness, and rejection. I had ignored the signs, told myself marriage was hard work, that seasons of love change, that exhaustion explains indifference. But this shirt, this cruelly premeditated spectacle, left no room for excuses. The man I had once loved, the man I had promised forever to, had planned my humiliation as though it were entertainment. And his family had sat at the table, complicit, waiting for the curtain to rise on my pain. Looking back, I should have seen it coming. Jake had been slipping away long before that night. His late nights at the office had multiplied his explanations, rehearsed and brittle. He smelled of cologne that wasn't his, showered before crawling into bed, and dismissed intimacy with murmured excuses about stress. Sunday mornings that once belonged to us, flour-dusted counters and lazy pancakes, were replaced by golf games with his father or networking brunches I was never invited to. The house grew quiet without him, and I found myself speaking out loud just to fill the silence. When I suggested we plan something special for our anniversary, I had clung to the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, he wanted to repair what had broken between us. His surprising enthusiasm had sparked a flicker of excitement in me. "I'll handle everything," he had said, smiling in a way that seemed genuine. For the first time in months, I believed we could begin again. But now I realized his smile had been the smile of a predator who already knew how the trap would close. I should have recognized the cracks sooner. The little things, the way his eyes slid past me, the way his touch lingered only out of obligation, the way he rolled away from me at night, clutching his phone instead of me. And yet, I convinced myself it was normal. People fall into ruts, marriages go through difficult seasons, but love, real love, survives. I told myself that over and over, clinging to a fantasy while my reality disintegrated. The truth began bleeding through weeks before the dinner. I had been doing laundry when a crumpled receipt fell from his pants pocket. It was from a custom t-shirt shop dated 3 weeks earlier. The description made my stomach twist: black tee, white print. 6 years of disappointment. I stared at those words, at the deliberate cruelty of them, and felt the ground tilt beneath me. I tried to tell myself it was a joke for a friend, a gag gift that had nothing to do with me. But deep down I knew. My husband was planning something vicious, and he was counting down the days until my humiliation. I remember sitting on the laundry room floor, the smell of detergent in the air, the hum of the washing machine vibrating against my back. My fingers clutched that piece of paper like it was proof of a crime, which in many ways it was. I tried to picture the man I had fallen in love with, the one who once stayed up late to listen to me dream about writing, the one who kissed me on rainy days and told me I was his anchor in a chaotic world. How could that man become the one plotting to make me a punchline? But the receipt wasn't the only evidence. Soon after, a waitress named Megan at a cafe near my office recognized my last name and pulled me aside. She confessed she had overheard conversations between my husband, his parents, and another woman. They had laughed over plans for a cruel anniversary surprise, one that would take place at Vincenzo's, the upscale Italian restaurant his mother adored. Megan hesitated as though debating whether to say more, but then she described the woman who sometimes joined them. Blonde, mid-30s, expensive clothes. Diane, my mother-in-law's personal assistant. The puzzle pieces began to click together in a horrifying pattern. Jake's absences, the cologne, the distance, the receipt. And now his family's gleeful involvement. The betrayal wasn't just marital, it was systemic, orchestrated by people who had never truly accepted me. For years I thought their coldness was indifference. But the truth was sharper. They had always intended to discard me when I no longer served their purpose. That realization hardened something inside me. The tears that had once flowed freely dried up, replaced by a quiet rage. I began to dig deeper. Credit card statements revealed hotel stays on nights he claimed to be working, jewelry purchases I had never received, dinner bills at restaurants I had never visited. His burner phone hidden in a desk drawer exposed a thread of messages with someone saved as D. Their words cut me deeper than any blade plans for a future together, complaints about me reducing my loyalty to nothing more than desperation. Each message was a wound, but beneath the pain, fire sparked. If Jake thought he could shatter me, he was wrong. If his parents thought they could orchestrate my destruction, they had underestimated the strength of the woman they had dismissed for 6 long years. I documented everything, photos of receipts, copies of texts, bank transfers highlighted in red. Each piece of evidence became both shield and sword. My desperation transformed into strategy. For the first time in months, I felt clarity. And when I sat across from a divorce attorney sliding that folder of evidence across her desk, I realized this wasn't just about ending a marriage. It was about reclaiming my dignity from people who thought they could strip it away for sport. She spoke of financial protection, of strategic planning, rather than reactive anger. Her words steadied me. I walked out of that office no longer just a wounded wife, but a woman with a plan. Still, the universe wasn't done revealing the depths of betrayal. While searching for financial records in the attic, I stumbled upon a dusty box labeled Family. Inside, photo albums revealed smiling faces, his mother, his father Jake as a teenager, and another boy a few years older always by his side. Michael, a brother Jake had never mentioned. Newspaper clippings celebrated Michael's achievements, scholarships, career successes, and then nothing. It was as if he had been erased from existence. When I asked our elderly neighbor, Mrs. Porter, about him, her eyes darkened. She spoke of betrayal of Michael, uncovering shady practices in his father's business, and being cut off completely when he threatened to expose it. She told me how Jake, desperate for approval, had turned his back on his brother. Suddenly, the man I had married seemed less like a partner and more like a puppet tangled in his parents' strings. My marriage, my life with him, it all felt like a cruelly orchestrated performance with me cast in a role I had never chosen. That night, staring at the ceiling in the dark silence of our bedroom, I realized something vital. I had been holding on to the illusion of a marriage, not the reality of one. Jake's betrayal wasn't just about another woman or a cruel t-shirt. It was about 6 years of manipulation, secrets, and systemic cruelty. His family hadn't simply disliked me, they had never intended to let me belong. And that more than anything set my resolve. The day I first reached out to Michael, my hands shook so badly I almost dropped my phone. His name had lingered in my mind since I discovered the photographs in that dusty attic box. For 6 years, Jake had never once mentioned having a brother. That silence alone spoke volumes. I hesitated before typing the message, uncertain if he would even respond. My name is Emma Collins. I'm married to Jake. There are things about your family I believe we should discuss. Would you be willing to meet? I half expected no reply, or worse, a cold dismissal. But the next morning, his answer was short, almost startling in its directness. Cornerstone Cafe, Sunday, noon. The drive to Boston felt like a pilgrimage into a future I couldn't quite imagine. Rain streaked across the windshield, blurring the edges of my doubts and fears. What if Michael was worse than Jake? What if this meeting was a mistake? My stomach churned as I pulled into the cafe parking lot, the smell of wet pavement filling my car. I spotted him instantly. Michael sat at a corner table, posture tense, eyes scanning the room as if he had spent years expecting ambushes. He stood as I approached, and for a heartbeat I forgot how to breathe. The resemblance to Jake was undeniable. Same strong jawline, same height, but his eyes, they were softer, kinder. Eyes that carried sorrow and resilience instead of arrogance. "Emma," he said, extending his hand rather than a hug. His voice carried no judgment, only recognition. "You look nothing like the wedding photo they keep on the mantel." That detail alone made my chest tighten. They still displayed our wedding picture in their home. Not as a memory, I realized, but as a trophy, a symbol of control. Michael's lips curved in a bitter half-smile. "Barbara points to it sometimes. Usually when she says you were the best Jake could do." The words stung more than I wanted to admit. For 6 years I had twisted myself into knots trying to be enough, trying to prove worthy of the Collins name. And all along I had only been a placeholder in their narrative. We sat, coffee steaming between us, silence pressing in until Michael finally asked, "So, what disaster brought you here?" Did Jake finally show his true colors? His bluntness startled me, but it also freed me from pretense. "He's planning to humiliate me at our anniversary dinner. A public toast to his freedom. A t-shirt that calls our marriage 6 years of disappointment. And your mother helped plan every detail." My voice didn't shake, though my heart thundered. Michael didn't flinch. "Sounds like Barbara," he said flatly. "Dramatic cruelty is her specialty." He studied me for a moment, his gaze sharp but not unkind. "Most people would just file for divorce quietly. Why come to me?" I met his eyes, letting him see the determination that had taken root in me. "Because I don't just want to leave. I want to understand the family I married into. I want to know what I'm really up against." For the next hour, he painted the portrait of a dynasty I thought I knew. Richard Collins, the patriarch who built his financial empire not on honesty, but on manipulation and secrets. Barbara, the socialite, who weaponized charm to climb into elite circles while controlling her family like chess pieces. And Jake, the eager son, who traded his brother's loyalty for their approval. Michael told me how he had joined the family firm after college only to uncover irregularities, small sums skimmed systematically from client accounts. When he threatened to report it, his father gave him an ultimatum: fall in line or disappear. Michael chose integrity. By the next morning, his accounts were frozen, his credit cards canceled, his name erased from the company. Jake called once Michael said quietly, pain flashing across his face. He wanted to hear my side. But then I heard my father's voice in the background. Jake said he was talking to no one. And hung up. That was 12 years ago. I swallowed hard, the weight of betrayal suddenly heavier. Jake hadn't just betrayed me, he had abandoned his own brother. The pattern was clear now: loyalty meant nothing if it clashed with the family's control. "He never mentioned you," I whispered. "Not once in 6 years. Michael nodded slowly. "Because to them I don't exist. I'm a ghost they prefer to keep buried." We left the cafe for a walk in a nearby park. The air smelled of wet earth, the pond reflecting the fading light of afternoon. We sat on a bench, and for the first time in months, I felt the tightness in my chest loosen. Michael reached into his bag and pulled out a folder. "I kept certain documents," he explained. Inside were partnership agreements, originals showing that Collins Financial had been meant to pass to Richard and his sons. By law, I still owned 25%, and Jake eventually would have inherited more. But my father rewrote everything when I left. I stared at the papers, the truth settling over me like a storm cloud. The Collins family had erased not just Michael, but the very record of his existence in their empire. It was the same pattern they were trying to play out with me: erase, replace, and move on as if nothing had happened. As the sun dipped behind the trees, Michael and I exchanged numbers. A fragile alliance had been formed, born not of convenience, but of shared wounds. And in his steady eyes, I saw something I hadn't felt in years: recognition. The sense that someone finally saw me for who I was, not for the role I played in someone else's story. Our meetings became regular, careful at first, disguised under the excuse of a book club Jake never asked about. Each conversation with Michael peeled back more of the Collins facade. Each truth confirmed that I was not crazy, not inadequate, not unworthy. I was simply the latest casualty of a family that consumed everything it touched. What I hadn't expected was the tenderness that grew between us. It started small, his hand steadying me when I stumbled on wet pavement, our fingers brushing when we passed papers across the table, the way he listened with an intensity that made me feel weightless. After years of Jake's indifference, Michael's attentiveness felt like sunlight thawing a long winter. One stormy evening, as rain battered the windows of his apartment, I prepared to leave after another long session poring over financial documents. Michael caught my hand gently. "Stay," he murmured. "It's not safe to drive in this weather." I stayed. And what happened between us that night wasn't calculated revenge or reckless passion. It was recognition. Two people exiled by the same family finding solace in each other's brokenness. For the first time in years, I felt chosen. Not tolerated, not managed, chosen. 6 weeks later, I sat on my bathroom floor staring at a pregnancy test. The pink line blurred through my tears. Fear, wonder, disbelief tangled together inside me. Jake and I hadn't been intimate in months. There was no question who the father was. When I told Michael, his voice was steady. He didn't panic, didn't dictate. He simply asked, "What do you want to do?" Not assuming, not deciding for me, asking. And in that moment, I knew. This child, this tiny life, born from two people the Collins family had rejected, would be my salvation, my beginning, my proof that love could exist outside their cruelty. Suddenly, I knew exactly what my announcement at the anniversary dinner would be. For days afterward, calmness settled over me like armor. My fear transformed into clarity. Jake wanted to trap me in humiliation. His family wanted to erase me. But I would not be erased. I would stand not as their victim, but as the bearer of a truth they could never control. The morning after the pregnancy test, I woke to a strange sense of stillness. It wasn't peace. Exactly, my chest still felt heavy with dread, but there was clarity. A child was growing inside me, and with that knowledge, everything sharpened into focus. I was no longer fighting just for myself. Every choice I made from that point forward would shape the world my baby would enter. That truth steadied me in a way nothing else had. Michael came over that afternoon. The moment I placed the test in his hand, he looked at me as though I had handed him something fragile, precious, and holy. He didn't smile at first. He simply nodded, processing it with the gravity it deserved. Then his hand came to rest over mine, protective and sure. "This changes everything," he said softly. It did. Suddenly, the anniversary dinner wasn't just a stage for my humiliation. It was a battlefield where I would reclaim my voice, my dignity, and my future. And I would not fight alone. The next step was protecting myself legally and financially. Sarah Reeves, the divorce attorney, had already warned me, "Don't wait for him to strike. Be strategic. Document everything." Her words echoed in my mind as I scheduled another meeting, this time with Vanessa Chin, the financial advisor Sarah recommended. Vanessa was calm, methodical, the kind of woman whose quiet confidence makes you breathe easier. She flipped through our statements with practiced efficiency, then tapped her pen against the suspicious transfers Jake had been making for months. "This isn't unusual," she explained. "Spouses planning to leave often move funds in increments small enough to avoid triggering alerts." She circled the figures with red ink, her neat handwriting cataloging each betrayal. "The good news is you're entitled to your half. What he's done will reflect poorly in court, especially with documentation." Her practical tone steadied me. Together we moved through each account, identifying what could be protected. My grandmother's inheritance was safe; it counted as separate property. Our joint accounts were trickier, but Vanessa guided me through a perfectly legal transfer, exactly half of our remaining savings, into a new account only I controlled. If he asks, she advised, tell him you're diversifying investments. It's simple, believable, and true enough. I walked out of her office with something I hadn't felt in months: security. It wasn't just about money, it was about breathing room, the ability to choose without fear of being left destitute. For the first time since Jake's betrayal began, I felt like I had ground beneath my feet. But the house was trickier. Jake loved to remind me that his parents had helped with the down payment, as if that made it less mine. But the deed listed both our names. It was ours. And if I wanted to free myself completely, I couldn't leave that anchor tied to me. The opportunity presented itself one evening when Jake left for an overnight business trip. His burner phone told a different story. He was meeting Diane at a downtown hotel. My hands trembled as I watched his car disappear, but the moment he was gone, I dialed Malcolm Reed, a discreet real estate agent known for handling divorces quietly. Within hours, he stood in our living room taking notes, his voice brisk but sympathetic. "The market is hot right now," he explained. "Your location, the remodel, you could list above what you paid. We'd get interest immediately." "I don't want to list yet," I said carefully, "but I need to understand the process. My husband and I are considering our options." His eyes met mine, understanding the subtext instantly. "If you decide to sell, I can move quickly. The paperwork can be prepared in advance. It requires both signatures, but everything else can be lined up." When he left, I sat on the couch staring at the neat stack of papers he'd given me. The potential sale price was higher than I'd ever imagined. Enough to secure a new life. Enough to show Jake that the house his parents had gifted us, the one they thought would bind me forever, was no longer their weapon. It was my escape hatch. Michael and I reviewed everything together that evening. My transfers, the market analysis, the documents. He spread his own papers across the table: partnership agreements, financial records, evidence of how Richard Collins had erased him from the company. His attorney had prepared a case strong enough to shake the very foundation of Collins' financial. "You never pursued this before?" I asked, running my fingers over the yellowed pages. "Why now?" His eyes softened as he looked at me. "Before it was just about money. Now." He reached for my hand, his gaze dropping briefly to my stomach. "Now it's about legacy, about building something honest for more than just myself." The words wrapped around me like a promise. For years I had lived under the weight of the Collins family's manipulation. But with Michael I saw the possibility of something new, not just survival, rebirth. We needed one more ally, and fate had already sent her to me. Megan, the waitress who had first warned me about the anniversary plan, met me one afternoon in the quiet corner of a park. She looked nervous, twisting her apron strings between her fingers. But when I laid out everything I had discovered: Jake's betrayal, the siphoned funds, the pregnancy, the plan for public humiliation, her expression hardened. "They're horrible people," she murmured. "I knew it the moment I heard them laughing about you." She glanced around, then leaned closer. "What do you need from me?" Her willingness moved me more than I could express. Together we mapped out the layout of Venenzo's, the table Barbara had reserved, the timing of the courses. Megan would be my eyes inside, ensuring Michael entered at the perfect moment. She even suggested I rehearse my speech on her. "Practice the pauses," she said gently. "The silence will make your words cut deeper than shouting ever could." So I stood in that park, smoothing my dress with trembling hands, and recited the words I had drafted. Each line came out hesitant at first, but Megan stopped me, corrected me, urged me to hold my head higher, to breathe between the revelations. "After you announce the pregnancy, pause, let them feel it. And when you reveal Michael, look straight at Barbara. Don't blink." By the third rehearsal, my voice no longer shook. The words felt carved into me, as natural as breathing. And for the first time I felt not just like a survivor, but like a woman holding the sword of her own story. The night before the dinner, I laid out my dress, a deep blue sheath, the color I had wanted for my wedding, before Barbara insisted on burgundy. Blue had always been mine, and I would reclaim it. On the night they expected me to crumble, I would stand tall in the color they had tried to erase. I packed an overnight bag with essentials and slid it into my car trunk. Every document, every heirloom that mattered had already been moved to Michael's apartment. Whatever happened at that dinner, I would not be returning to this house. Jake came home late, smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't mine. He didn't notice my calmness, didn't see the steel beneath my smile. You ready for tomorrow? He asked casually, as though we were partners planning a celebration instead of adversaries preparing for battle. As ready as I'll ever be, I whispered and turned off the light. The morning of our anniversary dawned deceptively beautiful. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, painting the room in gold. For a fleeting second, lying there beneath the warmth, I almost believed it was just another morning, before betrayal had turned my world upside down. Then Jake walked in with a mug of coffee, smiling too brightly, and reality reasserted itself like a blade pressing against my skin. "Happy anniversary," he said, placing the cup on my nightstand. His voice carried a practiced tenderness that rang hollow. It wasn't love, it was theater. I forced a smile, thanking him softly. He lingered in the doorway, dressed in his golf shirt, reminding me of the dinner reservation that evening. 7 o'clock at Venenzo's. Mom and Dad are looking forward to celebrating. The words twisted in my chest. Looking forward to celebrating the same way an audience looks forward to the final act of a cruel play. But I matched his enthusiasm, my mask as polished as his. I wouldn't miss it for the world. He left soon after for his golf game with his father, leaving me the day to prepare. I stood before the mirror that evening, smoothing the deep blue sheath dress over my body, fastening my grandmother's pearl earrings. My hands trembled, but not from fear or anticipation. This was no longer about surviving Jake's ambush. It was about rewriting the script, reclaiming my voice, and exposing the truth that had been hidden for too long. When I descended the stairs, Jake was waiting in the charcoal suit I had once told him was my favorite. Even his performance costume had been chosen to stab at memory, at sentimentality he no longer felt. "You look nice," he said with mild surprise, as though beauty were something I had to earn from him. "Thank you," I replied smoothly. "It's a special occasion after all." My purse hung heavy at my side, filled with everything I needed: financial documents, partnership agreements, the velvet box Michael had given me, and the courage that had taken me months to forge. The drive passed in strained silence. Jake's fingers clenched the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles whitened. His only comments were about the traffic, the weather, meaningless filler to hide the anticipation simmering beneath his calm facade. I studied his profile in the passing streetlights, wondering how I had once loved this man, how I had once built my life around him. When we arrived, Richard and Barbara were already seated at the corner table, their chosen stage for my humiliation. Barbara's burgundy dress caught the light, the Collins family color she had insisted on for every event. She looked like a queen awaiting her court's amusement. Richard's handshake was firm, but cold, the kind of greeting that suggested tolerance rather than warmth. 6 years, Barbara mused as we settled into our seats. It hardly seems possible. Time flies, I answered pleasantly, forcing my smile. So much has happened since the wedding. Jake signaled for champagne, his knee bouncing under the table. Across the room, Megan caught my eye, her subtle nod confirming everything was ready. My pulse quickened, but I breathed deeply, centering myself. The first course arrived, conversation dominated by Barbara's stories about the country club, Richard's grunts about the market, Jake's distracted glances at his watch. They were waiting, savoring the moment, convinced of their control. When there was a lull, I asked innocently, "Do you remember our wedding toast, Jake? Your father said something about how marriage was the foundation of legacy." Richard's chest swelled. "Family is everything. The Collins name stands for something in this town." "Yes," I murmured. "It certainly does." My words carried layers he didn't hear. The main course was cleared when Jake finally tapped his knife against his champagne flute. The sharp ding cut through the restaurant's chatter, drawing attention from nearby tables, exactly as Barbara had planned. "I'd like to make a toast," Jake announced, standing with glass raised, his eyes gleaming with malicious triumph. "To 6 years of marriage." He paused, gaze sliding to me with a smirk. "And to being free, single, and searching." The words struck like venom, spreading whispers through the restaurant. Barbara's smile widened. Richard smirked, and Jake reached under his chair, producing a gift box with theatrical flourish. "A little anniversary present," he said loudly, custom made. I lifted the lid with steady hands, revealing the black t-shirt inside. 6 years of disappointment. Gasps rippled from surrounding diners. Richard chuckled. Barbara's eyes darted to ensure every nearby table had seen. For a moment, the weight of 6 years pressed down on me, threatening to suffocate. Then just as quickly it lifted. Their cruelty seemed so small compared to the life inside me, compared to the truth I was about to unleash. A calmness settled over me stronger than anything I had ever felt. I rose to my feet, smiling genuinely, for the first time that evening. The shift startled Jake. His smirk faltered. "Thank you for the gift, Jake," I said, voice clear, carrying through the hushed restaurant. "It's actually perfect timing, because I have an announcement of my own." Confusion flickered across their faces. This wasn't part of the script. "First, I want to thank you all," I continued, lifting my water glass in a mock toast, "for showing me exactly who you are. For 6 years, I tried to belong to this family, never understanding why I always fell short. Tonight has made everything crystal clear." Jake's smile collapsed into a scowl. "Sit down, Emma. You're embarrassing yourself." "No, Jake." My gaze swept the table, steady and unflinching. "For once, I'm not the one who should be embarrassed." I reached into my purse, pulling out the first set of documents. "Did you know your son has been moving funds out of our joint accounts for months, preparing for this night, while pretending to be the devoted husband I've already secured my half, including the proceeds from our house which sold yesterday, above asking price?" Shock rippled across their faces. Jake's went crimson. "You can't sell without my signature. You signed it 3 weeks ago," I cut in smoothly. "Buried in those work papers you initialed without reading. You really should be more careful with paperwork." Richard began to rise, but I held up my hand. "I'm not finished." I nodded toward the entrance, and then right on cue, Michael walked in. The resemblance between him and Jake drew gasps from nearby tables. He crossed the room with quiet authority, stopping beside me, placing a steady hand at the small of my back. Barbara's face drained of color. "Hell," she whispered. "Hello, Mother," Michael said evenly. "Little brother, it's been a while." The silence that followed was deafening. Diners froze, forks suspended in midair, straining to catch every word. Richard's voice was a harsh whisper. "What is the meaning of this?" "Long overdue," I answered. "Wouldn't you say?" Jake's eyes darted between us, realization dawning. "You and him, you've been comparing notes," I finished for him. "And what we've learned has been enlightening." Michael placed a folder on the table, spreading the original partnership agreements. "By law, I still own 25% of Collins Financial. You may have rewritten documents, Father, but I have the originals. My attorney is prepared to file Monday morning." Richard's face contorted, but Michael remained calm. "We have every proof. Bank records, witnesses, documentation. You can no longer erase me." I placed my hand over my stomach, delivering the final blow. "And one more announcement. I'm pregnant." I let the words hang, the silence stretch. "Michael and I are expecting a child, a Collins heir who will never know the manipulation and cruelty you call love." The restaurant went utterly still. Barbara's glass slipped, wine spilling across the tablecloth. Richard's face turned purple with rage. Jake staggered back as though struck. Barbara hissed, "You planned this charade to humiliate us." "No, Barbara," I said calmly. "You planned a charade to humiliate me. I simply chose not to play the victim." I lifted the t-shirt from its box and placed it before her. "You should keep this. It suits your family better than it suits me." Then I took Michael's hand. "Goodbye, Jake. My lawyer will be in touch." We turned and walked out, the murmurs of stunned diners following us, the crash of Richard's fist against the table echoing behind. Outside, the night air was cool, sharp, clean. Michael squeezed my hand. "You okay?" he asked softly. I breathed deeply, 6 years of suffocating weight lifting from my shoulders. "Yes," I whispered. "For the first time, I am." The door to Vincenzo's banged open behind us as we stepped into the cool night air. For a brief second, I considered turning back just to see their faces again, the shock frozen, the fury boiling beneath their polished exteriors. But Michael's hand tightened around mine, grounding me. Jake's voice cut through the night, raw and breaking. "This isn't over." He stood in the doorway, his charcoal suit rumpled, his face contorted with anger and disbelief. The man who had always been so controlled, so smug, now looked like a child whose favorite toy had been snatched away. I turned, meeting his gaze one last time. The streetlight threw sharp shadows across his features, and for the first time I didn't feel small beneath his eyes. "You're right, Jake," I said steadily. "It isn't over. Not until the papers are signed. But as of tonight, I am free." His mouth opened, then closed. He had no script for this, no prepared lines to control the narrative. I smiled, genuine and unforced, and turned away. Hand in hand with Michael, I walked toward his car. Each step felt like shedding another layer of chains I hadn't even realized I carried. The drive away from the restaurant was quiet. The city lights blurred past, and I leaned my head against the cool glass, my heart still pounding with adrenaline. "You were incredible," Michael murmured, his voice low, reverent. I was terrified, I admitted. "Fear and strength often share the same skin," he said gently. "But tonight you chose strength." His words lodged deep inside me. For 6 years I had been told I was not enough by Jake's coldness, by Barbara's disdain, by Richard's smirks. Tonight I had stood in the wreckage of their judgment and declared myself more than they ever believed. We reached his apartment, the same place that had become my refuge, my secret sanctuary. I stepped inside and finally exhaled fully, the weight of performance planning and secrets crashing over me in one tidal wave. I sank onto the couch, burying my face in my hands. Michael sat beside me, silent, his presence steady. He didn't try to fix it, didn't offer empty reassurances. He just sat there, his hand warm against my back, reminding me I wasn't alone. When I finally lifted my head, tears clung to my lashes. "Do you think they'll come after us?" His jaw tightened. "They'll try. Richard doesn't lose gracefully. But we have the documents, the proof, the truth. And we have each other." His hand slid gently over my stomach. "And soon, we'll have someone else too." A lump rose in my throat. For months I had felt erased, diminished, discarded. But here in Michael's steady gaze and gentle touch I felt seen, I felt chosen, I felt alive. The following weeks were a blur of lawyers' offices, financial negotiations, and endless paperwork. Jake tried to bluster, sending angry emails, even showing up at the house once demanding answers. But the evidence I had meticulously gathered, receipts, messages, transfers, spoke louder than his rage. Barbara attempted her own tactics, calling me a liar, a gold digger, a manipulator. She even showed up at Megan's cafe one afternoon, hissing that I had ruined her family. But the truth was simpler. I had only revealed what was already there. They had ruined themselves long before I arrived. And Richard, he tried to intimidate Michael with threats of legal battles, but Michael's attorney dismantled every argument with calm precision. The partnership agreements were airtight, the financial discrepancies undeniable. For the first time in decades, Richard Collins was forced to face a fight he couldn't bully his way out of. Meanwhile, I focused on the quieter battles, moving my belongings, creating a new home, preparing for motherhood. Some nights I lay awake, fear pressing against my chest, fear of raising a child under the shadow of such a powerful, vindictive family. But then I would feel Michael's arm around me, hear his steady breathing beside me, and the fear would soften into determination. I wasn't just leaving a marriage, I was leaving an entire legacy of manipulation, cruelty, and control. And in its place, I was building something honest, something mine. One evening, months later, I stood on the balcony of our new apartment, watching the sunset bleed across the horizon. My hands rested on the gentle swell of my stomach. The baby shifted, a soft reminder of the future growing inside me. Michael stepped out, wrapping his arms around me. "What are you thinking?" "That this child will never know what it feels like to beg for approval," I whispered. "That they'll never be told they aren't enough. That they'll grow up with love, not control." His lips brushed my temple. "Then you've already broken the cycle." I closed my eyes, letting his words wash over me. For so long I had measured myself by the standards of people who never wanted me. But now I understood. My worth had never been theirs to decide. Looking back, the pain still lingers. The humiliation, the betrayal, the 6 years I can never reclaim. But I no longer see them as wasted. They were lessons carved into my skin, scars that remind me of the strength I never knew I had. And if I could leave one truth with anyone listening to my story, it would be this: you are not defined by the people who try to break you. You are not the sum of their cruelty. You are the choices you make in the face of that cruelty. You are the moment you stand up, steady your voice, and declare no more. So to anyone who has ever been made to feel small, who has been silenced, who has been told they are less than, they are wrong about you, you are more, so much more. If my story touched you, if it made you pause, cry, or see your own scars reflected in mine, I ask you to stay with me. Like this video, share it with someone who needs strength, and subscribe to my channel so we can keep walking through these stories together. And if you've ever carried your own secrets, your own betrayals, leave a comment. Tell me you're here. Tell me you've survived. Because none of us should ever walk through this pain alone.